Mayor, I do believe you're muted.
All right, let's try this again. This is a virtual meeting using the Zoom platform. Members of the public can view this meeting live on Channel 8 of the city's website. Live Spanish translation services are being provided for tonight's council meeting by telephone. Please dial 720-386-9023 and use code 104091 *.
Traslación para español. El servicio de español puede marcar el 720-386-9023, código 1040913.
Thank you, Councilman Wadiola. We all know to keep our camera on. We all know that the chat function has been disabled, and we all know who the host of the meeting is. So we'll call the meeting to order. We have 4 presentations on tap this evening. The first is Building Safety Modernization. We'd like to invite Brian Foley, Chief Building Official, to make the presentation.
I am trying to move Brian over now. All right, Brian, you should be able to unmute yourself and start presenting when you're ready.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. I've already done that, have I not? I apologize.
Maybe, but we can't see it.
Okay. I apologize for not being better prepared. This is my first time doing a Zoom meeting with you all.
Brian, if you need to, I can pull it up.
That'd be great if you can do it. Can see it now? Okay, great.
Yes, sir.
All right, if we go to our agenda, are you able to see who's directing this? Is it me?
No, Brian, that would be me.
Okay, thank you very much. I apologize that we have to do it this way. But my agenda for my presentation today is to tell you a little bit about me and some of the things that we're doing, why we're doing them, and some of the things that I'm looking to do in the future, and then some discussion afterwards. Let's go to the next slide. So let's introduce me. We should be on the slide that has my name up at the top. I'm the former Chief Building Official for Fairfax County, Virginia. That's where I spent 28 years of my career, was working with them. You got a little bit of an introduction a couple of our last month when we talked about the National Electrical Code. I'm a structural engineer by training. I hold a license as a professional engineer. I'm a certified building official and a certified property maintenance official. But enough about me. Let's go on to factors driving the change in the building department. Obviously, we're seeing an increased workload, big things going on up in Reunion area. That's just one of many subdivisions. Greyhound Park is another big project, and Amazon Lowe's warehouse is just one of many of the large-scale commercial buildings that we're seeing. So if we go to the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about customer needs and expectations. Most of our customers would like to do most of their business online. Totally get it. I wish we were there. We're getting there, and talk a little bit more about that. They want to see more of our services. We have this housing boom going on. We have time to market timeframes that I'd like to reduce. And our developers are seeing a labor shortage and a building materials shortage. We heard from Oakwood last week that they're slowing down their production because they just don't have enough materials to meet the demand. So they are slowing everything down. On the next slide, I want to talk about staffing. We have some state mandates that we are required to hire inspectors that inspect electrical work that have a master's or journeyman's license with the state, which is really difficult to us to do. They're with a labor shortage, they're hard to get. We got one, we're really happy with that. Our staffing levels can't meet the workload. So we are looking at other ways to be efficient. Right now, I'm seeing a division of duties that I thought when I first got here was like, wow, we're duplicating effort and we need to stop all that. Also, another thing that is hard to, that the building departments, 46% are at retirement age, which is scary. On the next slide, we're going to talk about how we can attain efficiencies, and what I'd like to do here is we have some processes that are outdated. We're going to update them. We are swimming in paper, and I came from a jurisdiction that we had no paper. So I would like to bring that modernization to Commerce City. And last week we talked about some minor projects that didn't really need to have permit. So thank you for that. And also I had a meeting 2 weeks ago with the fire marshal of South Adams Fire District, and we looked at division of duties between what a fire reviewer does and what a building reviewer does. And we're looking to make that division of duties more clear. On our next slide, it's all about our new permitting software that is in the implementation phase right now. We begin testing on October 12th, so we're really excited about that. This new system, which you probably already heard about, is going to give our users and our customers and our sister agencies the ability to work all online and to have a more efficient process. So I'm very excited about that. So if we go to metrics, these are the things that I have already implemented. We now publish all of our key performing indicators on our website. So you can see how many permit applications for a 13-month window. You have the current last month and a year before, so you can compare year on and then month on. We do the reviews that we've conducted, the plan reviews we conducted, and the inspections that we have conducted. We list also all the permits that were issued for the previous month. This is pretty much an industry standard. So the first thing I wanted to do is get those done on a monthly basis and get those published online. I want to try to be as transparent as possible about our process. Another thing is updating the National Electrical Code. We did that last month, so thank you very much. The next thing we did last week was the administrative code changes. But here's something that I brought with me from Fairfax, was a typical detail so that customers can come in without plans and get their building review done instantly. We don't even need a building review. If you promise to build per our typical details, you will not need to have a building review. Now, with the basement finish, that's pretty simple. We come in, you get your permit, promise to build per the details, and you'll get your permit very, very, very quickly without any review other than from the building department. For decks, if you promise to build per our deck detail, you would only really need to look at planning for setbacks, things of that nature. So real good information right there. Website redesign is for our next slide is in the works. I got a sneak peek of it today, and I feel that the best way to connect with our customers is have a robust website. And this is going to be an amazing space for me. And if you go all the way to where all the bullets are showing, we're gonna break the process down by steps and have stakeholder news, the monthly metrics, and we're gonna have this library of all of our forms and publications so people can easily get to that. I'm most excited about our news, because I feel like I don't have enough of a connection to the public right now, and I would love to have a news section. So our communications team is working on this now. I'm really excited about this. It's probably my most exciting thing that I'm working on. We go to our next slide. We instituted something new called a demo and metal stud permit for if you have a commercial project, a new tenant improvement. You can come in, submit your plans. We'll issue you at the same time you submit your plans for review. We will issue you a permit for demo and for metal studs, so that you can get to work right away and not have to be held up by the permit application process. With the hopes that by the time the studs are up and the demo is done, you will have your permit in hand to be able to move forward with your work. We're also working on footing and foundation only permits so that projects can get started early. And while the permit application process is happening for the main building, we could be working on the foundation. We did this very, very successfully in Fairfax for many, many years. I think the center image you see in that picture is from my old stomping grounds of a garage below grade. And last but not least on this slide is stocking permission. We should be able to stock our shelves and our mercantile spaces without having to wait for a certificate of occupancy. We just got to make sure that the sprinkler system works and the fire department has accepted it. And we would be in good shape to allow them to come in and do stocking and training for staff. On the next slide, we have some of the special programs that I'm working on a way to offer third-party plan reviews and inspections outside of the city. So what we're looking at is the developers can hire their own plan review team, provided it meets our minimum requirements, and we get to look at the resumes to see if that is indeed true. And then the building department would approve the review as soon as it's submitted, so as not to hold up the permit application process. But then we would go backwards and we would look at the plans on our own at our leisure, so that we can confirm that the outside reviewers did an adequate job. If we find issues and the contractor does not, the developer does not fix that, we will issue a stop work order until that's done. So that's the safeguard about that program. On the next slide, we have some self-certifications that we've been working on, so that if you are a registered architect, a PE, or you are a city licensed contractor, you can self-certify new telecom equipment on an existing monopole, some HVAC installations, and some sign installations. So this has really improved our abilities to focus our resources on new building construction. Signs aren't of high priority, so it's a win-win for everyone. On the next slide, we updated our small thing, but I thought it was worth mentioning. Our placards, when we need to do damage assessments, if a car drives into a building, or if there's a fire or a tornado of some sort of natural disaster, we need to go out and do damage assessments. We felt that our damage assessment placards were really out of date. They were generic for any jurisdiction in the country. We thought we wanted to be Commerce City centric and give more information and direction. The last thing someone wants to deal with when their house is damaged is, how do I get this fixed, and the hurdles to get there. We want to make this as simple and easy as possible. So if we scroll down to some of our future efforts, I already touched a little bit upon our Central Square, but our Central Square will have a portal for everything online. So you get your plan review, you get a notification. You get your inspection, you get a notification. There's no more need for us to be answering phone calls. You'll get that immediately upon the work being completed. On our next slide, I already told you about the typical details that we have that are already in place, and that is for decks and finished basements. We're also looking at potentially doing that for some other smaller projects, like some small retaining walls, some solar panels, and sheds. Retaining walls right now don't require a permit for 4 feet of retained earth and less, but that doesn't mean it's easy to construct a retaining wall. And you can walk by any neighborhood anywhere and see a failing retaining wall. So the more information we can get out to people, even though you don't need a permit, it'd be good to give the DIYer or the contractor some design guides. And also for solar, we see a lot of solar, and I'm looking to ways to streamline the solar project, the solar program. Some other things that I'd like to explore is, how can we help with green buildings? Can we give some sort of incentive program? Don't know what that looks like yet, but that is definitely in my mind. And also adaptive reuse. The old power plant that REI is in right now in Denver is a great example of a building that's been repurposed, and I'd like to see that happen. And how can we incentivize that? I don't know what those incentives will be, but that's something I definitely want to explore. And my last slide is more metrics. I'd like to get to the point where we can generate a typical time frame for when a permit is submitted to when the permit is issued, so that developers have more of a upfront information, they have expectations on when they may be able to get their permit. I also, you may field complaints at some point that we're taking too long. I would like to show a breakdown of how long we have it compared to how long the designer has it. I've seen very many instances where we've had it for several weeks, and the designer goes to make corrections and it takes them even longer. So I definitely want to know who's had it for how long, so that it gives expectations for both the customer and for us. And with that, we can begin any discussions or any questions that you might have.
Anybody on council have any questions, comments? Councilmember Madera?
Yeah, I think this is a great idea and a giant step in the right direction. So I'm all in support.
Thank you. I also want to do some strategic planning so that we can get all this stuff memorialized and get a lot of input from all our stakeholders.
Councilmember Hurst?
More of a comment. Brian, this is your second presentation to us, but welcome to the city. We really appreciate your experience, and this has to be my top 5 favorite presentations that I've heard since sitting on council. I love increased productivity and opportunity here. This is not just for companies looking to invest in our city, but it's also for the employees that work in your department. And I'm sure it just takes experience and kind of that push to get this done. I'm sure everybody's wanted to do something like this, so I appreciate getting us over that hump. And I have a lot of faith. There's some questions that I had initially when I read this last night. All this sounds fantastic, and I'm sure you have a backup to. All right, I walk in, I say I'm going to finish my basement. You tell me, here's your permit. You promise to build to these standards, and I go home and I do so, but I cut some corners. I think the only thing that I believe I got out of this, but I just want to make sure it's said, in this meeting, is what's the repercussion for me cutting corners after agreeing to build the standard?
Sure, that's a good question. Just because you promise to build by our details doesn't mean you are excused from inspection. So you still need to go through those inspections, and we're always going to hold the DIYer or the contractor to the minimum code. People always say, I built to the building code. Well, good for you, because the building code is nothing but the worst possible thing you can build by law. So you can cut as many corners as you want as long as it meets minimum code. But if you go below minimum code, all bets are off. Obviously there is a violation, violation process to compel the builder to comply. Ultimately, a lot of insurance companies are going to want to see permits closed when it goes to sale. You don't know how many times in my career, I've had real estate agents calling me in a panic to make sure that all of the permits are closed by the time the house goes on the market. And it's unfortunate. And I wish we could police every permit and get out there and knock on their door to see if they've made progress. That's just not how the nature of how building departments work.
Yeah, and so I appreciate that. I pretty much knew that's how you're going to respond to it. I think one of the I wanted to make sure is that we're not, opening the floodgates for people to finish their basement haphazardly. And really for several reasons that's important for me to talk about, because, you hear people, oh, I'm going to finish this. And not necessarily suggesting that they're going to cut corners, but they may not have that level of education that's necessary in the building code to do this appropriately. And one thing that I think this protects people from is, if I get a house inspection, if I'm buying that house from you and you did not complete the basement up to standard or up to at least the minimum building code, which I'm probably going to expect better than that, but I'm not buying that house, and hopefully you have a significant issue selling that house, because that's what it's here for. It's not, I don't believe this is an overreach. I believe this is, generally to make sure the standard person who's not educated on residential building code, when they're going to buy a house, yes, hopefully they're hiring an inspector, a certified inspector, to do that inspection, but this is to protect those living in our city and those potentially moving into the buildings of our city as they purchase them. And so I just wanted to make sure we got that on record, that we're not opening the floodgates. We still will definitely have a process to make sure that building code is followed at the very minimum, and that we're protecting, we still have the same intentions with our permits as we did before. We're just making a more efficient, improved process.
Yeah, and the biggest corner people cut is getting the permit in the first place. So if we make it as easy as possible for them to get a permit by making that, you don't have to do a plan, you apply for the permit online, you get your permit the same day. If that's the case, then we're one step ahead of where a lot of people think, I don't want to deal with the city because they're a problem and the waits are long. And then now I've taken that away from the waits aren't long.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much for your time this evening, sir.
You're welcome. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
All right, next up, we're going to have a Code Enforcement Division update. We'd like to invite Tricia Mason, Community Development Manager, to make the presentation.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. Thank you for being here tonight, and for the presentation I'm about to give you is going to be on code enforcement update. Jordan, would you like to be in control? Thank you. You can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So this slide is just highlighting some of our operational highlights that we've had. This past year, we've had a lot of shifts and changes in our staffing and operations in the way that we do things. We also took an opportunity with some of our staffing shortages through either attrition or people retiring, that we wanted to take this time to really kind of think about how we wanted to staff this division, where we wanted to go with it, what was our focus. We realized that through this, that we really didn't have a professional growth for our staff, for our code enforcement. And so we wanted to build that into our division. So we reclassified a position to make that a senior inspector, so that there would be different levels of advancement before somebody took on a role of supervisor or management. So we did fill senior inspector, as you guys are aware, with a gentleman from Denver who came to us with 20 years of experience and has been bringing a lot of really new, good ideas. So we're excited for that. Through the budget approval process, we hope to be able to add another position that we are going to make another senior inspector, so that we'll have 2 senior inspectors with staffing underneath them, which will allow for 2 opportunities for staff to grow within our division and then upwards. Next slide, please. Continuing with our operational highlights, as mentioned in the previous presentation by Brian, we are updating and upgrading a lot of our systems. So these will provide a better service for our residents, for council members, for staff. It's going to be much more interactive and a better customer responsive system. This will allow the residents direct access to information that they normally would have to either request through Quora or wait for staff to provide them the information. It also gives them information on different properties, what's being reported, things of that nature. It will also allow the system to automatically provide updates. We've also added an online payment portal, so that is now an option for residents as well as developers. And it also helps with accurate reporting problems. So when somebody goes out and they see a property that they might have a concern with, that'll allow for a pin drop that gives us the specific address. Oftentimes within our city, that tends to be a problem to know where that is. Also, the system will allow people to identify whether it is an actual Commerce City jurisdiction or not. So again, we have a lot of those pocket areas that are unincorporated areas. So this will help to define those for people as well. This past season, we also were looking at our contract services who we use for our abatements to help us with our weed growth and mowing, removal of trash and large items. We found that having just one is probably not the best. We taxed that person, and so because of that, and we're not their only client, it makes for longer wait times for us. So we are doing our new RFP for contract services, and we hope to secure 2 to 3 companies so that we have more opportunities to provide faster services and mitigate issues as they arise. Next slide, please. Violations, as noted in past, we still have the same top violations. Next slide, please. This is broken down more to based on by ward, and there was a request to find out which violations happened within a 12-month rolling period. So we did include that information for you. As we can see, some of the numbers in green are the good numbers. The ones that are in red are the ones that provided an uptick. As you can see, a slight increase from council referrals as well as from CRM complaints. But overall, our numbers were trending down. Next slide, please. We also did a shift in our concentrated enforcement areas through a suggestion from a previous study session. We wanted to redirect our focus on areas of the city that were not managed through HOAs. So we did that. We kind of restructured where people would focus their enforcement and then do either reactive or less proactive enforcement in certain areas that had HOAs. As you can see, that was a good and a bad. We did sort of break up some of those areas that had larger enforcement issue problems, but because of that, then some of the other areas became more of a concern for us. So what this told us and how we're using this now is we have requested quarterly heat maps from our GIS division, and we will look at those maps and see where our enforcement is working and then where it is not, and we will adjust based on that. So we'll be doing quarterly adjustments now rather than just yearly. Next slide, please. Our normal weed notices that we send out, we normally send out a postcard citywide. We decided not to do that this year because of the updates that were being done with the new Clean 3 initiative. Our communications team decided that we really wanted to kind of wait on that, not to confuse people into the 2 different programs. So instead, we still did the 118 letters specifically for the large lot undeveloped property owners, mostly because of the change that we had in our property maintenance. And then we did utilize social media as well as our city's newsletters to keep the reminder about weeds and property maintenance, so on residents' minds, and to help remind them of what the standards are. Next slide. With the change in our code, we did see an 81% compliance rate for those that may have been in violation. We sent out the notices, and the compliance rate was really receptive. I think it has something to do with the increase in fees if we had to abate and fine them. So we did see a positive result from that. Next slide, please. So again, some of the other outreaches that we're continuing to do is we are continuing with our neighborhood inspections. They were formerly known as C3 sweeps. Again, we're kind of redesigning that program, but I did not want to not be in neighborhoods, and we did not want to stop sort of that the PACE program that we were involved in. So we're still doing systematic inspections, and those are based, as I said, on our heat maps, where the CRMs are coming in from, the council concerns that we get from you all about areas where you have a concern. And then we also will still send a postcard or a notice to those folks, letting them know that we will be in their area. Should they have any concerns or suggestions for us, to let them know we'll be in those areas. We're still trying to connect with the HOAs just to keep in touch with them. We realized that their meetings that they had, where they were having in-person meetings, might not be happening as regularly as what they once were. So we have decided to start sending quarterly updates to HOAs to keep them informed of complaints or issues that we might be seeing in those neighborhoods, as well as inviting conversations to us about issues or concerns that they might be having that we can both help with. We were having a fall hall event, as some of you might be aware of. It was going to be an opportunity for people to use dumpsters. We were going to have them in the city, and we decided that it really was not going to be an added value for the residents to participate in this. And the reason why is because they would still have to find something to load up their large items with, bring them over to a location where these dumpsters were going to be, and then have to dump them in there. So there was a lot of work involved. And so what we decided was really what was missing with this was the information piece. We do have several bulk item pickups that our waste management provides free of service. So just out to the curb, and then they pick that up. There's also, you can call and you can have bulk items picked up. So there are services available. We felt that people just weren't educated or didn't even realize that some of these events were happening. So in lieu of the fall hall event, we decided to participate in National Good Neighbor Day, which is on September 28th. Tomorrow. So what we'll be doing is we're going to be out in several locations, utilizing our rec centers and grocery stores where permitted. And we'll be handing out some cards with little seed packets just to engage with the public, talk to them about what it means. Property maintenance have information on their cards for them, and just really kind of connect with the community. Next slide, please. So our program updates, these are some of the things that we have in the works moving forward for this year, and possibly that will carry on into the future years. One of the program updates that we were working on is called Working Hard in the Yard. For these programs and suggestions, I really did focus on the 2018 resident survey, looked in there and see what was missing, what did our residents find was missing, and most common in that was the engagement. They felt that there was a disconnect between the city and the residents. So I really wanted to try and figure out how can we connect with our residents better. I also looked and used the city manager's vision as well as our city's own vision in kind of creating some of these programs. So working hard in the yard, what that program is, it's recognizing residents that are doing more than what is expected. A couple cases and points of that, we had an inspector who was working a certain area and saw a gentleman out there with a cart in the alleyway, bending over, just picking up trash and putting it on his cart. So this program would be for those types of people that we see doing extra. It's a simple $5 gift card to a local business, whether it's an ice cream place or a coffee shop or a donut shop, one of those places, just for people saying thank you and engaging in a way that is not always met with a negative approach. The next one, and I need your guys' help with this, it's what we would like to do is provide a donation, if you will, for Contra Estates. We have 2 senior residential apartment buildings that are independent living, but for those that are age qualified and income qualified. And for that, what we would like to do is get participation from the residents to donate items, non-perishable items for Contra Estates. The other Madonna, they are already having something done for them. So we would like to participate and do something for Contra Estates. All we could come up at the time was carrying cans. So like I said, it's, you know, I'm not married to that title, but if you guys have other suggestions, I would love to hear them. And again, it's supporting those residents who feel disconnected from our community. In addition to this, there is the potential that they may not have a Thanksgiving dinner for them because of current situation. So again, this would just help kind of fill some of that void. The next is what we have already touched on, is National Good Neighbor Day. To this year, it's a simple thing. Next year, we would like to build on that and have it be more of a community involvement. And then finally, proclamation making October Code Enforcement Month, which you all should see on your agenda for next regular session for council. The governor, as well as the code enforcement, has declared October Code Enforcement Month. So we would also like to have the city make that proclamation. And finally, these are some more programs that are under staff consideration at this time. And again, just want to highlight them to you all just to get you thinking about them. The first one is a neighborhood compliance committee. The neighborhood compliance committee is really for those folks who, again, do not have the support of an HOA, but it is geared just kind of to define ways to get the community involved in proactive enforcement, but within their neighborhood. So it would be, you know, we have several neighborhoods in the southern part of the city, and we do have a focused area that we would like to try this out on first. So, you know, for example, Rose Hill or Tichy, Camp Adams City, those neighborhoods, and have a liaison from those areas work with us to identify and highlight issues that might be specific to their neighborhood. Again, a way to build on getting the community involved in proactive enforcement. Snow Angels, this is a program that we hope to build into a volunteer program, and it's really a good neighbor program. Having people check on their neighbors, making sure that their sidewalks are clear. Again, it's promoting safety. We do recognize that sometimes people want to help, but they don't have the means to help. So we do have a proposal that if that is the case, we can buy the shovel for them, and then they have the tools to help their neighbors out. We also will supplement that working with our CDBG program, as well as working with our contractors that we have now for that, until that program gets built up. Abandoned structure register. We do not currently have a register for our abandoned structures. And so we understand that this is a huge health and safety concern due to illegal activities, the inadequate maintenance and security, illegal occupancy, things of that nature. So we really want to try and help to combat that with a registry program. And it just helps to keep the people informed that do not occupy these properties, what their minimum maintenance requirements are, and then sort of have a, you know, for us in the city, we also then are aware which ones are vacant. And so if we see something going on, we know how to address it better. And then the last bullet point is revising and reinstating the new neighbor welcome pack. We used to have packets that were given to residents that when they moved into the city, to give them all of this basic information, to let them know who to call and when, what the expectations are. Just a real quick overview of what to expect when you move into Commerce City. So that is something that we wanted to reinstate and start doing again. And again, we don't know if it's going to come into the form of being an online booklet or if it's going to be sent to their house. Again, some of these things haven't been fully vetted. It's just in the early stages. So with that, I would like to ask if for your comments, questions, suggestions, anything that you guys might have.
Anybody on council have any questions, comments? Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I'm just curious on slide 13 with the Community Compliance Committee. I do think that's an excellent idea, but I was just going to ask, when you start implementing that, can you try to have at least 3 to 4 people from each ward to make sure, you know, Commerce City altogether is represented and not just from one area or location?
So this specifically is for those areas that don't have an HOA. So I think maybe as it grows, it potentially could grow into that, but to start it, the focus is for those who are not represented through an HOA.
Because I still think, though, even if they have an HOA, you know, I think it's nice to have, you know, everyone to still give some input. Even though they have an HOA, I still think they probably have some concerns. So that would, you know, I think everyone should be included if you could take that into consideration, because I get a lot of people that do live in HOAs and they have concerns as well. You know, even though they have an HOA, they have a lot of the same concerns as people who don't have HOAs. And then my next question, where it said for abandoned structures, I think that was on slide 13 also. Can they include possibility? I don't know how the mayor and other council feel about this, but I think it should say abandoned. Can it include abandoned land structures as well? Because there's a lot of vacant lots within Commerce City that seem like they're abandoned as well. So can it include structure and land?
Yes.
And then one last question. Do we still have someone on the weekends that are doing monitoring, doing the code enforcement? Because I continuously still get a lot of complaints from my constituents on the weekends that there's ongoing concerns. And it seems like that's been a lot of things occur on the weekends. And a lot of my constituents have asked, is anyone actually patrolling on the weekend?
We do have coverage on the weekend. That is something that we're also looking at, is the hours that we're covering, and is that sufficient, what we're doing with that. So We are looking at their schedules right now, but it will still include weekend coverage.
So what are their hours and what is it days?
So currently, right now, it is both Saturday and Sunday, but it is for a 4-hour block. So from 8 to noon.
Mhm. Yeah, because see, that's a concern if that can be looked into, because seems like a lot of my constituents are complaining it's usually in the evening hours as well. So, I'd appreciate it if that can be looked into, some evening hours. Thank you. That's all I have.
Councilmember Wadiola.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a question. I just saw the thing for tomorrow today on social media. How did we promote that? So folks, and maybe, social media works different sometimes. And so how did you guys promote that? Because I just saw it today and I just shared it. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing it. So we had our community relations team work on advertising that for us. So I'm not sure when, how, or the rotation in which they did it, but they handled the promotion part of it.
Okay. Yeah. Because I think, and maybe Roger could answer to see when it went out. Because if it just went out when we got it, which was today, I mean, that's just, we're not going to have a successful event one day prior. Someone just messaged me like, when did you find out about it today? And it's a great program. That's, I really, when I read it today, it's a great program. So I know I would have loved to get behind it sooner so we could really push it out, not just the day before. So that's just feedback that I just got and I just saw. So hopefully we're promoting it. And next time you guys do something like that, again, you use us as the vehicle to get it out to our community. We have larger networks than some staff and, we can push it out. So that's just, thank you.
I appreciate that. I know that part of it too is because we were really focusing on having a fall hall event. And then when we realized that that wasn't going to be what we thought it would be, that's when we shifted gears a little bit. And so we knew that this would be smaller in nature. And that's why we're really focusing on just highlighting it smaller this year, and next year we have a much larger grand idea. So thank you for that.
Councilmember Hurst.
Yeah, thanks. I think what you're doing is a lot of good stuff towards, I think, a bigger goal. One of the things that I think Councilman Guardiola was just getting at that I wanted to touch on was, I think our big educational period should be the second quarter of the calendar year, associated with the time we turn on water, if you will. So around South Adams County Water and Sanitation Districts, April 15th turn on. I know from the HOA Metropolitan District point of view, that's kind of 30 days later enforcement starts on covenants. And so might be a good time. And I think one of the educational pieces that we can look into is that baseline. I know a lot of homeowners associations use city regulation as kind of their baseline and then may get stricter in certain areas off of that. So, 7 foot of clearance over a sidewalk. A lot of people say, oh, that's a dumb HOA regulation. No, that's a city regulation. And I don't think it's dumb either, but people will say, oh, tree diameter. And a lot of folks, at least in my experience, are fine with it once it's explained a little better on where that regulation originates, why it's there, what it's protecting, so on and so forth. But I don't want to claim, ignorance for others, but a lot of times once that quick educational opportunity is taken, the conversation seems to go a little better. Obviously not with everybody. Not everybody's happy with all of that. But I think that's a really good time frame for us to start those discussions, is kind of beginning of April, maybe late March, but beginning of April, May, and June, when all that enforcement, all the, we have a spring like we did this year,
Yes.
with massive growth in weeds and everything else, that really helps set the tone for the lack of, hopefully eliminating some of the need for enforcement, if you know what I mean, just that educational piece. And then just how that's attached to, I meant to say this earlier, I just can't, I'm totally mind blanking, but our landscaping plan for each neighborhood that is living under an HOA. A lot of those regulations live inside of that. And a lot of people say, well, where in the city regulation does it say this? Well, it's in the landscaping plan that was submitted during the design of this neighborhood. And that's what we still are governed by, if you will. And so just getting a little deeper into, it's the city law. No, let's talk about why, let's talk about how it's connected. Let's talk about how that's attached. And similar to what Brian was saying from the building department, if that is accessible and easy online, I'm not saying we have to, hold 10, city meetings or anything like that. It's just, let's make it easily accessible, attach to social media, get it into our newspaper, so on and so forth, so we can have that quick reference point. I know from my work through HOAs and stuff, sometimes I even have to go, oh man, I know it's a regulation, I've read it before, but what document is that in that I can pull up quickly while I'm on the run to share to this person who's yelling at me? It's nice when you can, because when they're yelling at you and you're right, sending them quickly the link is very helpful. It de-escalates the issue quickly. So just making that accessible and part of the educational piece that we're working towards is just a suggestion. I think it makes everybody's life a little easier, because I think we're all moving down the same path. We know how awesome Commerce City is. We know that with a little bit of work, it can present itself even better. And I think education is the first step in that.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much for your time this evening, ma'am. We will move on to our third of 4 presentations, which is a housing authority update. Would like to invite Tracy Jones, housing coordinator, to make the presentation.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, and City Council. Thank you for, oh, my video went off, I apologize. Thank you for allowing me to come and give you an update about the Housing Authority. Jordan, can you please control the presentation? Thank you. Next slide, please. Just to give you a little history about the Housing Authority, the city council created the Housing Authority in 1979 under the Housing Authority Law, CRS 1973-29-4-201. And so there was a time when the Housing Authority was much larger than it is now. It was fully staffed with there was an executive director, there was a real estate department, pretty much anything you can imagine. At that time, the Commerce City Board of Commissioners also served as the Urban Renewal Authority until the 90s, when council assumed that role for the URA. Next slide. Our mission for the Commerce City Housing Authority is, together with our community, we will maximize the availability of safe, quality, attainable housing for all Commerce City residents while fostering stability and promoting dignity and self-sufficiency. Next slide. Our vision, the Commerce City Housing Authority envisions thriving community, which all residents enjoy a quality of life enhanced by stable and attainable housing. Next slide. Our goals: to preserve and enhance the number of quality affordable homes in Commerce City, examine opportunities for new affordable developments in the city, develop additional services and opportunities to promote self-sufficiency, work with partners to develop and meet common affordable housing goals, and continually thrive for excellent and professional Authority. Next slide. Our core values are collaboration, innovation, commitment, integrity, compassion, and respect. Next slide. So some of the past accomplishments of the Housing Authority, we assisted Catholic Charities with a 99-year land lease to build Madonna Plaza, a senior housing development, and provided land for the development of Prairie Rose Plaza. We also partnered with other agencies to remodel the existing 72 units and to build 40 new units at Pinecrest Apartments. We partnered with other agencies to develop Contour Estates Apartments, a community for senior and disabled residents. And we donated the land for Joe Riley Park. Next slide. Currently, we administer housing choice vouchers, which is also known as the Section 8 program. We administer those vouchers for the state of the Colorado State Division of Housing. Right now, we administer approximately 160 vouchers. That has increased quite a bit over the last 10 years. Probably about 10 years ago, we were administering about 60 vouchers for the state. And currently we're at 160, and that number continues to grow. Once phase 3 of the Mile High Greyhound Park opens, we will be administering an additional 50% of project-based vouchers that will be located on that development. So we're hoping by the end of 2022, we should be administering nearly 225 vouchers. We also operate in partnership with on-site management at Pinecrest Apartments. Next slide. The Housing Authority owns 4 of 6 single-family homes that are located on Contour Estates. We rent those homes at a very affordable rate. We provide the activities coordinator for Contour Estates, and currently the Housing Authority is administering $1.6 million in emergency rental assistance funds for Commerce City residents, and we have spent over $900,000, very close to $1 million as of today. And we are finalizing the IGA for ERA2, which is another $1.3 million. Next slide. Some of the other existing programs that we have a small loan rehab program in which residents that are under 80% of area median income, they can receive loans up to $20,000 with a 3.5 to a 5% interest rate that has a deferment for the first 5 years. And they can start paying after that 5th year, and they have a 10-year repayment. The same for down payment and closing cost assistance for first-time home buyers. They too, if they choose to pay off their loan in that first 5 years, there's no interest that's associated with it, but they're not required to make any payments until after that 5th year. Next slide. So we are a special limited partner in some low-income tax projects, low-income credit tax projects that are located in the city. By the Housing Authority partnering in these partnerships, it allows for the units to be affordable. So in most of our partnerships, our percentage of partnership is 0.001%. So a very small ownership in the development. But what that does mean is when a housing authority partners with a development, no matter how small the ownership agreement is, that makes that property eligible for property tax exemption, which assists in allowing that development to be affordable. So in that process, we've partnered with Contour Estates, phase 1 and 2. Most people think that is one development, but it's actually two. It was built in two different phases. Pinecrest Apartment, we have a little different makeup in our partnership agreement where we actually, that partnership had several other entities that were involved in the beginning that have since left the partnership. And so left in the partnership is the Housing Authority and the tax credit partner. And so for that particular project, we work with the management company, and we actually have some control over who the management company actually is. Village Crest Apartment, we partnered with them a few years back when they were looking to apply for tax credits to rehab their property. And so we partnered with them at that time so that they would be able to keep the units affordable and be able to rehab those units. North Range Crossings is the 216 unit development that is in the Northern Range that we partnered with to allow so that they are able to provide affordability in the northern part of the city. Our most recent partnership is Greyhound Park Apartments. As part of that partnership agreement, the Housing Authority will actually have an office that will be in phase one of the development. So we will actually be moving our offices over to the Greyhound Park Apartments. Next slide. Some future projects that the Housing Authority is looking to do is develop the 24 vacant lots on the Concert property. In addition to owning those 4 single family homes there, we also own the vacant lots. Some of the challenges have been finding ways to build something that's affordable. As I said before, fortunately, we're able to keep the rents affordable with the existing units, but we're looking for ways to be able to develop the 24 vacant lots and still have that affordability. The Housing Authority, we're always evaluating options with new partners for developments or redevelopment or expansion of existing multifamily properties. We are coming up on our compliance period for the Pinecrest Apartments. And with that development, the Housing Authority has purchased some adjacent land. And at this point, we don't know what that looks like, but there are some hopes that we would be able to expand and rehab Pinecrest Apartments sometime in the near future. Next slide. So that's just an overview of kind of some of the things that the Housing Authority have done in the past, some things that we do now. Are there any questions?
Does anyone on council have questions? Councilmember Noble.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the presentation, Ms. Jones. I have a lot of questions, actually. And so I will start here. We're talking about tax benefits to the developer. And could you describe how those benefits work for the developer once we decide to go into partnership with them?
So Colorado Housing and Finance Authority, CHAFA, they are, I would say, the keeper of the tax credits for the state of Colorado. So what happens is every year they put out the qualifications that people have to meet in order to apply for tax credits. There are different syndicators. The syndicators are the people who actually buy the tax credits. This allows, once they buy those credits, so let's say you have a business, right? They buy the tax credits, and that allows them to use these tax credits over a period of time. This helps this helps fund the affordability piece of these particular projects. So now you have someone who wants to build a development. They are going to go to CHAFA and they're going to put their presentation together and they're going to say, we want to build this project at this affordability level. Now that affordability level can vary depending on the project. So there's 9% tax credits, which are very competitive. And those are developments for people who are looking for a lot deeper subsidy, right? They want to provide housing for maybe 40% or 50% of very median income. So they're looking for deeper affordability. So they're looking for more funds. And so those 9% credits, they're very competitive. You may have, let's say you have $50 million worth of asks from these different projects, but there's only $20 million to give. And so CHAFA, you know, after everybody applies and they go through all the rules, they have to go in front of these committees and present their projects. And once it happens and they're awarded these tax credits, it goes into their project and allows them to build in that affordability. So building an affordable housing project is kind of like a layered cake, right? So you have to have all of these different funding sources in order to make it affordable. And most of the time, these projects have large gaps in order to make that happen. It's one thing to build a project and you can ask for, you know, whatever you want in rent, because then you can dictate the rent amounts to recoup your funds. But in these projects, you can't do that. You're agreeing for a certain period of time, depending on what your agreement is, with a minimum of 15 years, and it could be 20, 25 years, you're agreeing to keep this project affordable. So these funds are needed to help build into this project to make it affordable. One of the other layers would be partnering with the housing authority. This allows for property tax exemption, which also helps to make the project affordable. And so that's how that's how all of our partnerships come about. The housing authority, the board vets out projects that, as long as it meets their mission, they think it's the developer, is on the up and up. What they're presenting is good. It's going to help the Commerce City residents. It meets the housing authority's goals. It meets our mission. That's, kind of how the board decides to partner. Now, depending, our partnership is never much. It's always a special limited partnership. We typically wouldn't have any control in the partnership. But the reason that the housing authority does it is because it meets our mission and it brings the affordable housing into the city.
So when you talk about the 0.0001%, you're referring to the property tax exemption?
When I talk about that percentage, that any percentage that a housing authority has in the property allows the property to have tax exemption, property tax exemption. So if we had 0.5%, it wouldn't matter. Any ownership that a housing authority has in a project allows that project to be property tax exempt.
So we do give more than just the property tax exemption? Do we do give funds?
It depends on the project. Typically, the housing authority doesn't come out of pocket with funds. We usually ask for some type of fee, or in some cases, it could be an ongoing fee. In some cases, it could be, there may be something that is given to the housing authority at closing, and there may be another portion of that fee that's given later. Each of the deals are structured differently. And so the board makes that decision on what they feel the need is at that time. So so I'll give you an example, the Mile High Greyhound Park Apartments. part of that partnership agreement was we would have offices in that building, but that also fulfilled a portion of what the project needed, because tax credit projects have to show, it makes their application stronger if they can show that they provide some type of services in their community. And so by the housing authority being located in this building, so we're helping them on that side, and they're providing us with space to have offices.
And do they come to the housing authority first? Does a developer come to the housing authority first?
Typically,
When it is, okay. Can a partnership be rescinded?
Not during the agreement period. So once a project has reached its term limitation, just depending on what project it is what that limitation is. At that point in time, the housing authority would decide if that project were to reapply for tax credits, let's say for rehabilitation or whatever the case may be. The housing authority would decide at that time if they still wanted to be part of the project. The likelihood would be they probably would be, because what would happen is if the housing authority pulled out, at that point, if the developer or the owner were no longer able to make that project affordable, at that time they would take it to market rent, and we would lose an affordable building in the city. And so it would actually take away affordable housing, because the owner wouldn't lose the property, it would still be their property, but if they would no longer be required to make it affordable, they could take it up to market rate rents.
And I think it's important that we keep in mind the mission of the housing authority, and I'm glad you posted that too, which was safe, quality housing. So that aspect becomes important. And if a developer for some reason isn't meeting the standards that the mission is hoping to achieve, that there would be some sort of recourse for the city, since we're counting it as our affordable housing as well. What recourse do we have at all?
So during I'm sorry, I apologize.
That's right. If there's any issue regarding, safety or quality or that kind of thing, what recourse do we have?
So in a tax credit property, CHAFA is the keeper of compliance. So in that compliance piece, they make sure that the units are being rented to persons who fit in that income criteria, number one. Number two, they would make sure that the property is being kept up to the standards which are included in the agreement. And number three, if there were complaints from the residents could reach directly out to CHAFA and make those complaints. I know firsthand, I've seen firsthand where how CHAFA addresses those issues, because I do work alongside with the managers at Pinecrest Apartments. And so we have had an instance where someone has reached out and said, hey, they're not fixing this fast enough for me. And CHAFA has reached out, and I'm included in those emails, and they want to know, when did you get that work order request? When did you first find out something was wrong? And how, if you have not addressed it yet, when are you going to address it, and how are you going to address it? And once it's been addressed, they want to know that it's been taken care of. CHAFA randomly chooses the years that they come out and do site visits. That's been a little more limited because of COVID, but typically they come out either, if it's a problem development, they can come out every year. If it's one of their developments that's doing very well, they'll come out every other year and actually walk that property. I do walk that property with them when they come out for Pinecrest, but I would not walk that property with them when they came out for the other developments. That would be just because our role is so different.
Okay, and I do have one other thing to ask about, but I don't know if I'm the only one, but I'm hearing some rustling sort of noise on a mic somewhere. So I don't know what that could possibly be, but if anyone else is hearing it, maybe we can address that. Also, you mentioned that in the presentation that the Housing Authority provides the activity coordinator at Contra Estates. Did you mention that?
I did mention that. We
Okay.
are, yes, that is part of our agreement. And so we do provide that activities coordinator for Contour Estates. That the activities coordinator they are supervised by the Parks and Rec Department. And because it's a part-time position, I believe that position does something else part-time, but part-time, they are the activities coordinator at Contour Estates.
Okay, and I do have questions about that. I have questions about what their typical role is, what their role was during the pandemic, and how often they work with the residents, because the residents were left to their own devices during the pandemic, even though there might have been opportunity for Zoom or something. So it sounds like I should save that one for Parks and Rec in the future. Would that be correct, Ms. Jones?
That would probably be correct.
Okay, all right. That sounds good. I had hoped to also hear from Chaffa tonight, but I surely appreciate hearing from you, because I'm now approaching 2 years on the city council, and you play a very important role for our city. So I'm glad that you were here to talk with us tonight. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks again, Ms. Jones, for the presentation. I had a few questions also. Do you know where are those 4 single-family rental homes for the seniors? Where are those 4?
They're on the concert property. So when you go around that inner circle, so when you first drive onto the property, to the left, to the north, it is the first 4 properties that would be closest to Monaco. So not the one that sits on the interior circle, that is privately owned. And when you get all the way to the ends of that circle, that one is privately owned. It's the first 4.
Okay, thank you. And then you mentioned that there was development for 24 vacant lots on that property. Do we have any approximate idea when it'll start being able to be built on those vacant lots, and why it's taking so long? I know you mentioned developers, but is that in the near future?
So we've had several developers approach us about partnering about those lots. Part of the problem is, because it's the Housing Authority's mission to keep them affordable, we're having difficulty in trying to figure out, how do we build single family and keep it affordable, right? Just because the cost of building is so expensive, we want to be able to rent those units at prices that people can afford. We've looked at several different things. We've had a charrettes done for us to give us ideas and options about things we can do. We just have not been able to come up with something at this point that does not have, at that time, at least a $2 million gap. Now that gap would be even larger based on the cost of labor and building material. And so that gap just continues to grow. I wish I could give you a great estimated time on when that will be done, but I constantly speak to developers and reach out to people and see if they have any ideas for us. But it's one of those things that's really difficult. And the biggest difficulty is definitely the financial piece, because the board is so mission driven to make sure that those units stay affordable. So the ones that we rent now, they are less than some of the 2-bedroom apartments. So that just gives you an idea of the rate we rent those at. So they're 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,300 square feet homes, and the housing authority keeps that rent at $1,100 a month. Some of the apartments exceed $1,100 a month, even in the Contour building, because they're 60% AMI units. So the board is renting those below 60% of AMI. So because it's, the housing authority mission to keep that affordable, it has been very challenging. And every time someone steps in, a developer steps in and says, hey, we have the magic wand, and then they start running numbers and it just doesn't pencil out. But we haven't given up, we're still trying.
Okay, thanks. And then, because when you mentioned like rentals, I don't know if anyone else saw it. They did an article yesterday in the Sunday Denver Post under the Denver and the West section. And it talked about how seniors can't afford housing, pretty much anywhere in Colorado. So I was just curious. It also said like a 1-bedroom average is $1,600 a month in Denver, and can go up. And then the low end is $1,200. So what is the average cost for senior housing through the housing authority to qualify for one of those? What is our average rents in, like, say, the Contour Estates?
So Contour Estates has 3 different levels of affordability. They have 40% AMI units, 50% AMI units, and 60% AMI units. And so CHAFA sets those rent amounts for each of those income levels. And so, and I know this is one of the things that some of the seniors can find a little confusing, because they find it a little difficult to understand sometimes. Why do I have this 2-bedroom and I pay $1,100 a month, and this other person has the same 2-bedroom I have and they pay $600 a month? And the reason being is because so many of those units are at those different income levels. So if you come in and that particular income level unit is available and you're able to rent that unit based on your income, then your rent is lower than someone who has the same exact unit, but this unit was available and they qualified for it. And so I know that can be very confusing sometimes, but those rents vary. They're at different income levels.
Okay. And then I had concerns too about the activity coordinator. Why, other constituents in other senior housing areas asked me, well, why does Contour Estates get one and then they don't have one at their senior living facility? So would that be a Parks and Recs question, or do you know why they were chosen to get one and the other senior living centers didn't?
So in this particular development, it was written in the agreement that there would be a activities coordinator. And what happens is the project actually pays for, to some level, to some degree, for the activities coordinator. We are given, the housing authority is given a certain amount of money now. Typically, we spend more than that for the activities coordinator, but the project itself does provide some of that funding. Parks and Rec only supervises that position, but we actually pay for that position.
So they could, so like I said, a lot of constituents in some of the other senior housing areas, do you know, is it in the budget if like they even had a part-time coordinator as well? Then since, do you know, is that in the budget for other senior housing areas?
So it would be based on whatever agreement that particular development has, because it would be in that actual development's budget. It wouldn't be a city budget line item or a housing authority budget line item, but it just happened to be part of the agreement for services that made this particular development, like I mentioned before, when developments apply for tax credits, there are some things that you have to do to make your development more appealing, right? Because you want to beat out all of these other developments when applying for tax credits. You want to win those tax credits. And so part of the agreement with for the Contour Estates was that there would be an activities coordinator on site. And so that's how that came about. And so in order for other developments, depending on what type of funding they had, that would be something that they would have to, that they would have to pay for. It's not something that Parks and Recs put any money into. It's just, it was part of the agreement that the Housing Authority had as part of that development.
Okay, thank you. Okay, a few more questions. Do you know, on slide 10, you mentioned the rehab loans. Do we know how many single family rehab loans were distributed in Ward 2, like in 2018, 19, and 2020?
I can tell you for the last few years, we've done no rehab loans. And the reason being is because we've had CDBG in place where people can get grants. And so we encourage people to apply for the grant funding because that's something that they don't have to pay back rather than the loan. So we're more than happy to piggyback those loans off the grants if they don't have enough money to still pay for everything that they need. They're more than welcome to apply for the loan, but we definitely encourage them to use those grant funds first. So for the last few years, there have not been any rehab loans.
Okay, and how does the loan information go out to the public? Because this is the first time like I said, when I was looking at the presentation. So how does that information go out to the public?
So it's on our website, and to be honest, we don't advertise it the way we used to since CDBG has come into play, and we're pushing the grant a lot harder because we understand because these loans are only for persons who are at or below 80% AMI. We want to make sure that we're providing them with the best opportunity. And so CDBG has been the best way to get that accomplished with the minor home repair programs and allowing people not to have to pay those funds back. And so prior to the city getting their own CDBG allocation directly, the Housing Authority administered the minor home repair program in conjunction with the county to cover city residents. So we've actually had a minor home grant program in place for quite some time, even prior to the city becoming a direct recipient of CDBG funds.
Okay, and then last question and concern. I know you mentioned that staff does inspections and then you go to the one at Pinecrest, but I'm just curious, when was the last time that city staff has actually went to all these properties, and how often do they go to them? Because it's a major concern for my constituents. They voice continuous concerns like dumpsters overflowing. The Pinecrest apartments, they complain about there's not enough parking, and some of them are seniors and they can't even get a parking space to go to their apartment. They have to park on the street. So, and then they complain that some people have 3 to 4 cars. So, these are really concerns from my constituents. So how often, and is there enough city staff on the Housing Authority to go more often and address their concerns?
So that's me. I'm the person who walks those properties. So Pinecrest Apartments, I walk and also contour the exterior and the cottages, that area I walk every other month, just to make sure that we're staying in compliance. Residents know that they can call me anytime. As far as the parking at Pinecrest, they have assigned parking. You're not supposed to park in the lot unless you have a parking sticker. So residents can have up to 2 parking stickers. One is their assigned spot and one is an open spot that's based on first come, first serve. When spots were being assigned, management did do their best to try to make sure people were closest to their building. It's a little difficult to get everyone, right at their building, just because it may not always balance out that way, but there is assigned parking there now. There are a few additional handicap spots, and if someone is parked in your assigned parking spot, they are instructed they can call the tow service or call the patrol to have that vehicle removed.
Okay, so if I understood you correctly, you said you inspect them like certain ones every other month, or it's all of them?
I at least walk Pinecrest, and I do walk Contour. And the reason that I walk those properties on a regular basis is because the cottages we own, the housing authority owns those cottages. And so it's very important that they're being kept up. Last month I went and I walked the cottages, the interior, to make sure, because I know there's been some difficulty with the property manager and management staff. They've been short-staffed, and that's kind of happening at all the properties. It's been very difficult to find and keep maintenance staff. And so because of that, I wanted to make sure that we didn't have a lot of deferred maintenance in the cottages, and also at Pinecrest. So one of the things that, when I walk Pinecrest, I don't just walk the parking lot. I walk up and down the stairs to make sure that they're replacing the broken stairs, and I walk through the buildings to see what the housekeeping looks like, to make sure that they're keeping those up, because again, these are areas where the housing authority has a different ownership structure, and we do have a say on what goes on in those particular properties. So because of that, I make sure that those things are being kept up.
Okay, and one last thing, because like I said, a lot of constituents complain to about their concerns about the upkeep, and I encourage them, if they see something, to say something, and they feel really frustrated with the management. So just so the mayor and city council knows, would you want them to contact you directly? Because I get continuous ongoing concerns. So,
which development are we talking about?
Especially with the Contour Estates, with that management company itself.
So the problem with Contour Estates is because we are such a limited partner, we don't control the management staff. We do, however, I am however able to have conversations with them about concerns that come up. But we can't control, at the end of the day, what that management staff does. When I do hear from residents at Contour, I do encourage them and provide them with the information to contact the resident liaison for CHAFA, because they can hold them accountable. When they get those complaints, they follow up with those complaints. So I do encourage those residents to reach out to the resident liaison for CHAFA, and I provide that information all the time to them, because unfortunately, as much as I may not agree with some of the things that may be happening, the housing authority does not have the power to step in and adequately deal with those things.
So even thing like upkeep of the place, dumpsters, etc., they would have to go through CHAFA. And I mean, because if they're not getting any results, you're saying you can't step in.
So I step in anyway. If I hear something from a resident, I reach out. Typically, I start with the management staff, and if that doesn't get anywhere, I do reach out to their corporate office. I have reached out to their corporate office on a regular basis. But I always tell the residents if you really want something to happen in the time frame that it should happen, the resident liaison at Chaffa is definitely the place to start with that complaint.
Okay, and then one last thing I was gonna ask. Oops, I lost my notes. Actually, I think that's it. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Madera?
So when Chappa comes and does their inspections, what are they typically looking for?
So when they come out and do their inspection, so usually when they do a site visit, there's a few things. They review files to make sure that they're in compliance that way. And then they also walk the property to make sure the upkeep, things are working. They choose random units to make sure things are working in the units as they should. And so they'll choose a certain amount of random units. Those tenants are notified that Chaffa is going to be entering their units to inspect their units. And then they will also speak to the residents and say, how's everything going? Is maintenance taking care of your things in a timely fashion? What's happening? Do you have any problems? Is everything working properly? So they do have those conversations with residents when they go out. Again, they didn't do any inspections last year because of COVID. And so for that reason, I do know that they are scheduled to do some inspections this year, but I can't tell you, I have no idea if Contour is on the actual inspection list.
So when was the last time that they inspected Contour?
I'm not really sure, because let's say that the COVID year, let's say that last year it could have been Contour's year to get inspected. And so if that didn't happen, it could already be 2 years, right? Because they would have missed last year if that was their year. So if that's the case, they should be coming up on inspection at least by next year.
And so Contour has been like on the compliance list, the every other year inspection?
They have been, I don't know of any write-ups that Contour has from Chaffa. I couldn't tell you for sure, but I am not aware of any that they've been in any trouble for non-compliance.
And does Chappa like write up a report or anything after the inspection, or is that public?
They do, and I know it would go in their file, and they would also provide the development with the report. I don't know that those reports are public, just because they do review files, and so there would probably be a lot of personal resident information in those reports. So I couldn't say if those reports are public or not.
Okay. So we don't get copies of those at the housing authority?
No, we don't. Only now, if there's a problem at Pinecrest, we definitely know about those, because those reports do come to me at the same time that the management company would get that.
That's based off of the ownership percentage. Then.
Correct. And your role in the project. That is correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Noble?
Is there, could you possibly ask Chappa to keep you informed about when they're doing inspections, so that this is happening on a regular basis, since you're kept informed?
So can I ask Chaffa to inform me when Contour is being inspected?
Any of them that they're inspecting in Commerce City, so that we can ensure, in particular, the senior housing is up to snuff.
I can ask.
Oh, that'd be great.
I can definitely ask. Yes, I can do that.
Okay, wonderful. That would be really terrific. Thank you. And I know that the Councilmember Madera is our representative to the Housing Authority. And I was curious about something else. We have the loan program.
Yes.
And I know you mentioned that the rehab loans, there hadn't been much on that, but what about the down payment closing cost assistance? Have we done anything in that arena in the last 2 years?
Not in the last 2 years, we have not. Reason being, there were other programs that were grant programs. The city was a part of the Metro Mortgage Plus program that was being run out of Denver. And so by their economic development department, and because the city joined that, people were able to get down payment and closing cost assistance so they did not have to pay back. So that's where we had actually been referring people. One of the things that we are in the process of doing is trying to work out something with the Division of Housing, because that's where the funds that we use, these are recycled CDBG funds. So they have some really old rules attached to them on what we can and what we can't do. So we have some limitations. So one of the things that we've been trying to figure out is, how do we approach these being some type of forgivable loans? In the past, a long time ago, the Housing Authority had loans from a lot of different pots, and they were able to do forgivable loans. And so we've been proposing things to Division of Housing to see if we could take those old funds that we have and turn them into forgivable loans versus something that someone would have to pay back. You know, if they lived in their home for a period of time, the loan would be forgiven and they would no longer, you know, they wouldn't have to worry about making payments. And so that's something that's still in the works. And so an actual proposal has not been given to Division of Housing at this point, but we're just kind of throwing things out there and see what sticks. It's kind of, hey, what do you guys think of this? What do you think of this? And so we're hoping soon they will say, oh, that's a great idea. Yes, you guys can do that. And then we can write an official proposal and turn those funds into some type of grant funds, where they're eventually grant funds instead of something that someone has to pay back.
Oh, great. That sounds fabulous. I would definitely encourage that. And it would also be helpful to get data from you on the down payment closing cost assistance in, say, the last 5 years, to see how we've been doing in terms of helping out our residents, because that sounds like a great program. I know that we had rental and mortgage assistance, but that's not the same thing as being able to buy your own home. So that would be great to be able to see where we are on that and how much more we can do by keeping our residents informed of this program. Thank you very much again.
You're welcome.
Member Alan Thomas.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just found it, really concerning that just because COVID, last year, I realized that happened, and it occurred, but that CHAFA didn't even go and check on, didn't do the inspection, or it seems like nothing was conducted either by the city staff, because how are we ensuring the residents are safe, and they're, we say quality community for a lifetime, and we're not even making sure they're taken care of. So, it would be nice if the mayor and city council gets updates, to make sure these properties are being maintained and the residents' needs are being met as well. And then on the Contour Estates, another idea that some housing authority land properties are doing. Has anyone from the city reached out to the residents at the Contour Estates to maybe start a resident council?
So the Housing Authority has not reached out to the residents about starting a resident council at Contour. Again, before we could propose starting any programs inside of the Contour apartments, we would have to first make that request through their management department and get that okayed before we would be able to go into the buildings and start doing anything.
Okay, because if it's the residents speaking up for themselves, why would they need the management approval?
I'm not saying that the residents themselves would need management approval. What I'm saying is the housing authority would need management approval in order to go into the apartments and request to start any programs. The program that Tricia Mason brought up to you before about where we were trying to come up with a creative name, where we want to do the food drive for the residents at Concert for the holidays. That particular program, I made sure to go in and speak with the management to make sure that we had their permission and their understanding of what we were trying to do for the residents, and they were on board and very excited about it. And so just us being able to do any type of business or go into the property, we want to keep that good working relationship. And so I'm definitely, it's the housing authority's practice to reach out to the management staff and get those things cleared first.
So can you look into that possibility? Because, if they're not getting representation from Chaffin, seems like it's the staff, housing authorities, isn't following up with them also. It'd be nice if they could get a resident council going, to be a voice for the people living in these areas, and so is that something you can look into and see if, because a lot of the residents that I've spoke to would possibly be interested in something like that.
I can look into it, sure.
Yeah, and if you could give us an update, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
Member Hurst?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, but one of the things that concerns me is this whole conversation seems to be leading down the path that we're not the landlord, we have no ownership. And so anything that we do is out of our purview, because we don't own the building. It's a privately owned building that we had, like you said, a less than 1% interest in, and that was really just to keep it affordable by giving the tax breaks. And so just trying to get clarification on that, because the city may supervise the one events coordinator, but it doesn't sound like we have any ownership of the building or any right to take additional action on this apartment complex than we do on any other apartment complex. Is that correct?
That would be definitely my understanding. That is why I keep mentioning the point of anything that the housing authority wishes to do at the building or engage the residents about definitely requires approval from the management company.
So it's no different than a number of other apartment complexes in the city that the housing authority has zero interest in. We couldn't be there as a private company, just like we have the same kind of lack of authority in these situations as well. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, thank you. That's just making sure I was following.
Councilmember Noble.
Thank you. And I would like to say that I do believe that we as a city have an obligation to our residents. We had code enforcement on tonight as well. So all of these things work hand in hand to ensure that we have a quality community for a lifetime. So any little thing that we might be able to do to help our residents, any stone that might be turned and we find something under there that can actually be a benefit, is something that we can do and we ought to do, because a quality community for a lifetime is the motto for this city. And I am fully on board with that, especially when it comes to the seniors. If you have ever sat in a meeting with seniors, as I did earlier this year, and there are people in wheelchairs, they are leaning on walkers, they're coming in on canes, I will guarantee you that you will want to do all that you possibly can for these folks. And so I think that we need to look at that. And we also need to look at the history of some of these developers before we agree to do anything with them. We can't simply say affordable housing is the answer when the affordable housing isn't up to snuff for the people who are living in these buildings. That's what's critically important. And if we have some sort of ability to use a bully pulpit in order to help our seniors, then I surely hope that we will take advantage of that. So I would hope that we would at least look into that. I know that the Senior Commission is going to be looking into it. And it's my clear understanding as well that the Senior Commission has every right to do so. You may not as the Housing Authority representative, but there are other things that we can do. And so everything that we can do, we should be doing. And I thank you, Ms. Jones, for agreeing to look into some of these things earlier this evening that that Councilmember Alan Thomas and I both asked about. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I just wanted to make one last statement and clarify a few things. You know, I used to be a surveyor for long-term care facilities. So we can't compare these properties to privately owned properties that have landlords because they are getting government money to operate. So that's just to add and clarify, we are obligated to make sure they are safe, etc., because it is being operated with government funding. So it is our obligation to make sure, like I said, they have a quality community for a lifetime. So I just wanted to add that it can't be compared to a private property. Thank you.
Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Just one quick thing I wanted to share with you all. You all will be taking action on this year's the upcoming budget for 2022, in which we have identified a family and seniors community navigator. So there may be some opportunities with that position to be able to help provide some of these opportunities as you brought forward with seniors in general, I would say within our community, and in particular some of these developments that have come of question today. So just want to put that back on the table just as a FYI that position will be forthcoming in 2022.
Councilmember Hurst.
Yeah, maybe it sounds to me that my comments may have been taken wrong. I was trying to follow where authority lies, and I agree with everybody's comments, but the it's pretty clear when you look at CHAFA and their rules that they have the authority. We don't. Similar to CDPHE, similar to EPA, and some of the other discussions that we have, that if we cross those boundaries, we could become liable, and we then take on liability that we've never had before. We didn't know. You could shake your head all you want. I'll show you exactly where it is on the website. And so we just have to be careful. I'm all about helping. Down to turnstones. We just have to be careful. We can't set expectations up front on things that we can't do and we don't have authority over.
Okay, any other comments or questions regarding this presentation? Seeing none, thank you very much for your time this evening, ma'am. We'll move on to our fourth and final presentation, which is the City Council social media policy. I'll invite Robert Sheasley, City Attorney, to make the presentation.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. We are revisiting the social media policy this evening. Jordan, if you would be able to bring up the presentation, please. The policy committee reviewed this based off council's feedback. I believe it was in May of this year, and came back. We worked together to come up with a revision, and so hopefully those committee members can speak to this and feelings they have about it. We'll go to the next slide, please. I just want to remind about the policy goals. There was some possible objection to this policy or concern that we don't need to have it. And I want to be clear, you do not need to have this policy, but it is brought forward to provide guidelines for social media use by council members when they're talking as council members. We have walked it back to be less controlling, but to be consistent still with the policy goals of the council. We've also cut back on the words and tried to make it a little more simple. Again, you don't need this, but in addition to guidelines, you don't have to have it, rather. This would help to protect the rights of the public, specifically First Amendment rights, and then also work to protect the city and council members from liability by providing those guidelines and setting some standards. And so keep that in mind as we're going through, and if you happen to review the red line of the previously provided document that was in the packet, so you can see the changes. Next slide, please. What we've made here is we've walked back concepts of personal use, and we've simply noted that social media, again, is voluntary and discretionary, and the regulation here is less about telling people what they can and can't do, but still setting expectations. And we're using intentional language about when something is an expectation. This is not the result of non-compliance with this policy is noted in this third line down, this third section that says the city is not responsible for a member's social media use if they use their official title or discuss official city business through social media, but they're not in compliance with the policy. The intent being this policy is set up to help protect you, but if you choose, and the city, but if you choose to go outside of these standards, which are focused on protecting the rights of the public, protecting the city, respecting the First Amendment, et cetera, of all people, then if you take some action that is inconsistent with other people's rights and draw a suit, the city would potentially be able to refuse to indemnify you and hopefully not take on public liability for that. It's also worth noting that some aspects of what are in this policy exist whether we put it in a policy or not, including record retention, open meetings law requirements, expectations of privacy for individuals, and then the First Amendment issues that you've seen in the news for the last few years. And so those come into play if your use of social media hits a certain threshold that we cannot define necessarily. And it's unfortunate that there's not a clear, bright line. Next slide, please. And so what we've identified in here is a set of standards. The first being that if it's a generally applicable council policy, we're not repeating it here. They apply as they would to your speech elsewhere. We have maintained the concept of restricted content, which is defined to include a lot of very discrete items, and that limit is there. It is subject to terms of use that have been retained, and recommend that you make those terms of use available on social media. It's a recommendation to do that. Those terms of use notify the public as to what they're engaging in here and what might cause their posts to be removed. We do encourage, again, not require, the use of a disclaimer. And we do remind that if you're posting as a public official, you do not have an expectation of privacy in those posts. Next comment, or slide, please. Again, we want to make sure that the council member understands that they're responsible for the intellectual property of postings. If you're using a copyrighted image and that is inappropriate, that is something that you have to be aware of. Image or other materials. We have added a concept of knowingly restricting account access or posts based on viewpoint. That's what somebody says. The content of what they say, taking a position one way or another. So you wouldn't be able to, under this policy, knowingly restrict it so that people don't accidentally fall afoul of this. We do, again, require that this be publicly visible. There's a process for deletion of posts if somebody is posting things that are inappropriate and not in compliance with the terms of use. Reminders of the open meetings law issues, a caution as opposed to a standard for ex parte communications, and then a reminder about retention standards so that we are not deleting posts that would be required to be maintained as public records. Next slide, please. We have retained the limitation on staff report and reduce the length of this section to identify that staff could continue to provide generic content and then assist in implementing graphic design and branding. Next slide, please. Here's what we removed. We don't repeat the policies. We've removed an expectation that you make accurate representations to avoid suggesting that we are restricting what people can and can't say, and the manner of their representation. We have removed a requirement or expectation that social media use be used to benefit the city and the city council, and that it be used to improve discourse and understanding. We've tried to reduce any apparent regulation of personal use because that boundary is unknown. There was a concept trying to cover that, but to avoid appearing to regulate personal use, that's been removed. And then a requirement has been removed to confer with the city attorney before removing posts that would violate the terms of use. And so next slide, please. That's my favorite slide. I look forward to hearing your feedback. Again, it's not something that you are required to have, but if you wish to proceed with this policy or go back for further revisions, we'll stand ready to take your comments. Thank you.
Any questions or comments? Councilmember Noble.
Thank you, Mr. Sheasley. I am a little curious about the accurate representations that was eliminated. I don't recall that, and since I do sit on that committee. Can you remind me what the reasoning was on that? That's certainly something that's been of critical importance in recent years.
Sure. I would have to look elsewhere to see the document. I apologize. I'm having severe password issues, so I only have this screen available to me tonight. I don't recall the specific reasoning. I believe it was one of the concepts, though, that could appear to be in the eye of the beholder as to whether something's accurate or not. And then a council member could perhaps feel like their ability to speak freely is restricted by that, restricted by that provision. And then there's a question of the consequence of that. And so feeling that it was a bit of overreach by having that in the policy, I believe. I do think that there may be, and I apologize, I don't recall, another generally applicable policy about how people represent things to the public, but there's certainly not a restriction on public officials being in any person in the world. This is not intended to be a dig, and I apologize. It started that way, at being completely accurate on things, because again, facts and the key critical facts are open to interpretation, and some are more important to some people than others. So I believe that was the motivation to make this more neutral in that regard.
Well, maybe we'll take a look at that when it comes time to vote on this again. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Sheasley, for your presentation. We'll now move on to the reports section of our evening. Mr. Tinklenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. Several items to give you an update on. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to attend the Colorado Municipal League Conference this past week. There were several really good presentations, and so it was very good to participate in that. Wanted to let you know that the user fee impact fee report, we're expecting, well, the deadline is October 1 for proposals to put that together. So wanted to let you know that's coming up. And then again, just a reminder, the police crime statistics are on the website. In community development, land use cases are holding steady at 187. Inspections, 2,794 were conducted so far here in September. So, tremendous amount of volume. Residential certificates of occupancy, 66 were issued so far this month. And also the temporary certificate of occupancy was issued for the 1 million square foot warehouse for Lowe's. So that facility is nearly complete, and they're able to start putting their equipment inside. In terms of economic development, of course, we had the State of the City event this past Thursday, And the mayor gave the keynote, and developers shared poster boards about their current projects. And that appeared to be a big hit with the attendees. Also, 5 site-wise representatives attended, and they announced they're relocating their headquarters from unincorporated Adams County, or their operations, I should say, and they're moving that into Commerce City. Also, the Metro Denver site selectors conference occurred on Thursday, and the Economic Development Corporation, or the Metro Denver Economic Development Corporation, unveiled their new branding campaign called the Elevation Effect. The Blue Ribbon Economic Development Committee recruitment is underway. Applications will be accepted through October 22. And then this past week, I held my first meeting with part of the police department. I have a second meeting tomorrow, and then there's a third one coming up after that. The first one went fairly well, so hopefully we get good results out of that. Public Works, the 104th Avenue signal coordination is ongoing, and they expect to make final adjustments this week. Pavement management, paving is complete except for the road reconstruction on 88th Avenue and Jasmine. 88th Avenue is to occur right around October 17, and Jasmine, the concrete contractor is not available until October 18, so they're expecting that to be done by the end of October at this point. That's it for a quick update. Any questions on that?
Any questions for Mr. Tinklenberg on his report? Mr. Rogers?
Mr. Tingleberg, I think you have another question for council in regards to food delivery at their residence, given that we've gone back to remote hybrid video study session and meetings.
Yes, you asked it. Very good, thank you. Does council want that to occur where it's delivered to your home instead, since we're doing the virtual meetings?
Councilmember Alan Thomas?
I liked the idea, and plus we were giving back to, the Bison girls, and really helped without Russian, so I really liked it. And I really liked that the mayor initially thought of that idea.
Any other opinions? Councilmember Madera?
Yeah, I'm a little indifferent, heard about the staffing shortage at the Bison Grill, so I know it's kind of a hassle for them to deliver to our home, so I'm okay, if we don't have it, but like I said, either way is fine with me.
Councilmember Smith?
I'm the same. I could go either way. If it's not a burden for staff, then absolutely, but if it is a burden, then I'm okay without it.
Well, we certainly want you to be able to attend meetings and not have to do that on an empty stomach. So whatever you direct.
Doesn't look like there's a strong opinion either way. Councilmember Hurst?
Hey, Roger. So we were at an event maybe 2 weeks ago or a weekend ago at the Reunion Elementary golf tournament, and we were talking to some of the management at the restaurant, and it sounds to me like they have a new line cook and some have had some success filling their staff vacancies, and that sounds like maybe that's part of the decision here, and I'm also indifferent, but I just wanted to see if you had heard anything about that. I think Councilwoman Grimes and I both heard that sounds like they're doing much better at the restaurant from a staffing perspective, or just over the last couple of weeks.
That's my understanding as well. And far as I know, Monday nights are typically, a slower customer night, but again, we can verify what their staffing level is.
Councilmember Noble?
I would make it your decision since it was previously. And also, it reminds me that I really would like an update on what is happening with our staff regarding COVID, since we have gone back to Zoom meetings now. What is happening regarding staff in City Hall? Are they back on Zoom? Are they splitting their time? How is the time split? How many are vaxxed? How many have tested positive? The whole breakdown on staffing for the future as well. What departments have to be out in the field, which ones don't. What we're doing that arena would be really helpful to get that information.
Sure, I can do my best to bring that information Monday night.
Councilmember Wadiola?
Yeah, I'm the same. It's up to you, Roger. Given the staff situation about Monday night dinners.
Okay, all right. We will check with the restaurant staff at Bison Grill and go from there. Thank you.
Councilmember Noble, did you have an additional question for Mr. Tingelberg?
I'm sorry, I don't. Thank you.
Cheesley?
Thank you, Mayor. Just 2 notes. You'll get a litigation and ordinance report this week, and then Wednesday at 4, there's a policy committee meeting, continuing discussion of ethics standards. So please let me know if you'd like a Zoom link for that. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from Mr. Cheesley? Seeing none, thank you very much, sir. Any council members wishing to make a report? Councilmember Smith?
Thank you, Mayor. On Saturday, I went to the Historical Society. They had their little celebration. It was a really cool experience. If you haven't been to the Historical Society Museum, it's really cool to see some stuff that you probably forgot about. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Councilmember Noble?
Yes, thank you so much. In addition to being at the State of the City, I also attended the 27J school ground breaking in South Lawn. And if there is any way for the mayor to repeat his speech that he gave, or if it was videotaped, I think it's something that we all would like to hear. It reminded me of the location of this new school reminded me of an issue that occurs in the area because of the location of Landmark Academy. Landmark Academy is not on a major thoroughfare. It's in a neighborhood, and it makes life very complicated for people coming and going in the area as parents arrive and depart and so forth. So the question is, how can we require developers, when they are contributing land for schools, to put those schools in locations that are better for the students and better for the traffic patterns of students coming and going. Also, the schools can be really noisy in terms of loudspeakers and so forth that are going on. So it's just something to consider, but I really would like us to figure out how we can make better decisions in terms of our approvals of where the schools are actually located. I have noticed in driving back and forth on Tower Road, the intense amount of development, the houses that are going up. And I am also concerned about the number of applications that have been approved for these developments without regard to available desks or activities for young people. They don't seem to exist in North Commerce City. A representative for 27J said that he drove the area and saw that we could actually need 5 to 6 more elementary schools in addition to the one that they just approved on Walden. And there's no chance of that happening for at least after this bond issue for potentially another 5 or 6 years. So just because we get the land doesn't mean that there is going to be a school built until there is the money available to get that school built in some fashion. So those are all really important considerations as we move forward on these projects. And anything that we can do in terms of as a city council, playing more of a role in the approval of these projects, at least say for the next year or so, I think could be really beneficial. I've another person on our council talked with me about this as well, and it does appear that if we had more of a role and that these didn't fall under administrative approval, that we would be able to then have well-informed conversations with our constituents about where all these houses are coming from without schools available for their children, without childcare available on, say, the north side of 104th, or any other matters that come up. So I think that could be really important as well. In addition, I've been contacted by a resident who lives in Foxton Village. As you may know, I'm both on the airport coordinating committee as well as a group called NOISE, N-O-I-S-E, and don't ask me what all of those letters stand for, but they do. That acronym does spell something regarding airports. And he is keeping track of the violations of noise from planes coming out of Denver International Airport. It's something that we probably should revisit at some point in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Noble. Councilmember Wadiola.
Thank you, Mayor. Attended the Historic Society anniversary, really cool stuff. They brought out a 1941 from the Eastman Service gas station. It's on their lot, but yeah, it's really cool. Attended the Adams City High School homecoming game, and then headed to the Shrimp Bowl for the Commerce City Youth Athletic, and just was out with our residents. You know, that's the best part of being in the city. So a lot of things going on, but thank you. Oh, one last thing, sorry. Commerce City Eats finished. It's tomorrow, the 28th, I believe, or yesterday. We got some good participation. 8 restaurants and participated, and it was larger than the year before with 4. So we'll do it next year and hopefully partner with a lot more organizations. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Wadiola. Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to let everyone know, I also went to the museum and felt a little more of a disturbing experience because I think a lot of Commerce City's history wasn't addressed and isn't addressed in the museum. For example, like our first Black Lieutenant Governor, Joe Rogers, is not in there. Our first African-American Black Chief of Police, Chief Nichols, is not in there. Senator Dominic Marino is not in there. So I, had a different experience when I went in there. So just wanted everyone to know that, especially if we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion in Commerce City. Those are things that needs to be addressed in that museum. That's how I feel. And then also AutoZone opened on Quebec, which is in my ward, and thought that they had a grand opening, a brand new one built, and just thought it, that was really neat that they opened, but we didn't have the opportunity to have a ribbon cutting ceremony for them. And that's all I have in my reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Alan Thomas. Any other council members wishing to make a report? Seeing none, I will be brief with my comments. Did attend the 27J groundbreaking for the elementary school number 14, as was already discussed. Also attended the State of the City address on Thursday, and that was the extent of my activities for the week. So thank you very much for everybody's participation this evening. Thank you to all the staff that presented to us on these topics, and we will see you next week for a URA meeting followed by a regularly scheduled council meeting. Have a good night. Have a good week.